Okay, so we, again, did all this. Again, that's not your assignment there. That was the assignment that you did before the break. But it was the section title, well, the chapter is Analytic Trig, and the section title is Verifying Trig Identities. Okay? And so even just a few days that we've spent on these, you should have a concept of what trig identities are now. Basically just, again, using the rules of algebra and substitution methods of what's equal to what to switch these things out and make both sides of the equation equal to each other. Okay? So that's the goal with these. So we had all these in the previous chapter, working on just trig, trig of right triangles and all that kind of stuff we were doing in the previous chapter. So all these you should have memorized. And so whether you, I'm sure you did not, but whether you spent some time on these over the break at all or anything like that, but these are the basic identities that you just need to know. You've had enough of these now to understand the fact that the more you have these memorized, or just the quicker you have them in your brain right there, the faster you can do, the rest of the problem. And so if you can just substitute out, sine squared plus cosine squared equal to 1 real fast, then it just makes the problem that much easier and faster. So those are the basic identities that you need to know. Okay, seen them all before. Okay, so we have the reciprocal ones, which we've talked over and over about. The quotient ones, which are mainly just tangent and cotangent. The Pythagorean identities, now you've seen enough to realize that those show up relatively often, so those may be the ones you need to spend some time on. And then the cofunction identities you've seen, and you've seen that they really don't show up all that often, but you kind of need to know them, because when they do show up, you need to know what they are. So, okay. From there, we went to even and odd, and these are a little bit harder to remember, but the easiest way to remember these, remember, is the even ones, which means it doesn't matter if you plug in a negative value, it still comes out positive, are cosine and secant. So cosine and its reciprocal. Okay? All the other ones are odd. Sine, cosecant, tangent, and cotangent. That means that if you plug in a negative, you get a negative answer back out again. So cosecant and secant are the only ones that it doesn't matter if you plug in a negative, you get the same answer. Okay? So the even odd, and again, you've seen enough to know that these don't show up all that often, but when you need to know them, you need to know them. And so you just have to have those down. Again, I think the easiest way to remember them is just know the even ones. Okay? Verifying an identity, we've done enough of these now that you know that you need to manipulate the sides of the identity through the rules of algebra and then substituting values, right? Okay? And so I think, yeah, we just went to examples here. So if that was the original identity, remember one of the methods is changing to sines and cosines. And so if you switch all these out to sines and cosines, okay, and then do the rules of algebra, then they just both work out to be the same thing. Okay? So we're just gonna remember the different processes or choices that you had. So changing everything to sines and cosines was a possibility. Using factoring, so like this one you can factor out a cosine, okay, and then work it from there. So factoring is a common one. Again, you've seen enough of these to know that you factored several of them. Okay, using two techniques, which this one we switched some things to sine and cosine, and we split the fraction on the one side to two fractions because they had the same denominator. Combining fractional expressions, and so typically what did you have to do with this kind? What's something that we did over and over and over again? Common denominators. So you'd have to get a common denominator here. Typically to get a common denominator, not always, but typically you cross multiply to get the common denominator and then go from there. So so this one's a little bit longer. We don't necessarily need to go through it all, but this one was a little bit longer to find the common denominator, but eventually everything here combined to the fact that you could get 2 secant on both sides. This one was a long one. Okay. This one we haven't used this process very often, and so it's a little bit tricky when you do end up needing it. But we did find out that you could cross multiply here basically, and it would be pretty much the same thing. But they solved this one by multiplying both sides by the conjugate of the denominator. Okay, kind of like working with radicals. Which, again, if you cross multiplied, that would basically be the same thing. So, so you can do it either way. Okay, but that is one method. Okay, so now here's the new assignment, which is really the third assignment that we've done out of this section, because we had an assignment A, assignment B that we did in the first place, and so here's a third assignment out of this same section. Okay, so for the most part, it's just remembering how to do these from having 2 weeks off here. So that section, I mean, that's our first assignment for second semester, okay, which I'm sure all of you are aware of how grades work, that semester grades are the only things that matter in your high school career, because you only have 8 grading periods that show up on your transcripts. Those 8 grading periods are the 8 semesters of high school, and so your semester grade was the critical one, and then end of the year. So in terms of assignments and all that, we basically start all over again now. So in some ways, well, we really start all over again with everything. Nothing from first semester in terms of your grade carries over into second semester. In terms of calculating your grade now, however you want to look at it, you're either at 0 or you're at 100, however you want to picture it, okay? And we're starting all over again. So if you found yourself at the end of the semester someplace you didn't want to be, you start fresh, okay? If you were in a good place at the end of last semester, then you need to basically do the same thing you did last semester to stay up. So, okay. Questions, Jim? It is not on Math Excel because of the identities. Okay? And so I'm assuming, not that I've finished the rest of this chapter yet, but I'm assuming this entire chapter we'll be doing on paper. And I'll have to look at the next chapter whether we can get back to Math Excel or not. I'm assuming that we can, but I haven't looked at it yet. So I pretty much took the 2 weeks off. I needed it. So I haven't looked forward very much. So I'll do that in the next couple days. Okay? So typically, we would go back into the lab right now, but you can just find a book, find some paper, and spend some class time working on homework, which is a little out of the ordinary for us, but that's what we're going to do. Okay? So if you want to move around and you know, sit with somebody specifically, as long as you're actually working, not talking about your break, then I don't have a problem with that. But basically the 25 minutes or whatever that we have is for homework time. So, okay? Everybody have this? Again, it's on the Google Calendar. I just want to stop this other thing here.
I don't think this is going to affect my grade.
Oh, that's what I meant to say. Yeah, is